It is truly great to be back in the wonderful, beautiful state of Pennsylvania. Get ready for the great, great battles to come. We're going to have jobs, and you're seeing them already. We will renegotiate NAFTA. We are proposing major tax relief. Well, what about Obamacare's dead? It's gone. Democrats in Congress have no leadership. Senator Schumer is a bad leader. He's leading the Democrats to doom.
Was mean-spirited.
Taking the fight to the sanctuary cities. Oh, don't worry, we're going to have the wall. Don't worry about it. We are going to keep radical Islamic terrorists the hell out of our country. Hollywood actors and Washington media are consoling each other in a hotel ballroom.
Welcome to the series finale of the White House Correspondents' Dinner. No one wanted this gig. No one. Donald Trump doesn't care about free speech.
We are not fake news.
Everybody's using the word fake news. Where did you hear it first, folks?
Can you give us a question? Can you state categorically? You are fake news.
The media deserves a very, very big, fat, failing grade. We are Americans, and the future belongs to us.
That is our own Adam Klotz. He's doing some weather, but mostly basketball.
So we got summer camp games on the plaza this morning because it is summer camp time. This is the time of the year where parents get super excited. Holy smokes. Send your kids off to summer camp for a few weeks so you can get some peace and quiet at home.
That's right. Pick a good one.
We're going to help you kind of navigate the best summer camp for your kids. What do they like to do? How can you feel the most comfortable with them being gone?
Like trampoline basketball camp.
I didn't know that was a thing, but maybe it is, and you should look for it out there.
Well, today we are talking about the 100 days of accomplishments, ups and downs, and President Trump was out at Pennsylvania at Harrisburg yesterday at that big rally. It was a tale of two different events last night. Of course, you had the White House Correspondents' Dinner in Washington, D.C., kind of a sanguine evening with the president not in town, though thousands of people in Harrisburg showing up to hear the president.
That's right. Not a lot of bow ties probably in Harrisburg. Lots of bow ties in the swamp for the White House Correspondents' Dinner. It really was. And the contrast of his speech was, I'm here with the people while the swamp pats themselves on the back. And I think I watched the speech live. You heard from President Trump what you heard from candidate Trump, and his message was, I'm going to keep the promises that I made to you. Here's what I did. A lot of economic nationalism. We're going to secure our borders. We're going to rebuild our military. He criticized Democrats, as we pointed out. A lot of patriotism. It was straight up Trump.
Yeah, really doubled down on immigration, on saying, I'm going to build that border wall. I promised that to you on the campaign trail. I'm going to follow through with that. Also, just continuing to fight for the American people. Saying, I want to bring the jobs back here. I want to keep doing that. But also, as we all expected, you said the White House Correspondents' Dinner was also last night. So, of course, he used the opportunity to say, there's nowhere I'd rather be than right here with you all. And then using it to hit on the media. Here's what he said.
Let's rate the media's 100 days. Should we do that? Should we do it? Media outlets like CNN and MSNBC are fake news. Fake news. If the media's job is to be honest and tell the truth, then I think we would all agree the media deserves a very, very big, fat, failing grade. A large group of Hollywood actors and Washington media, they are gathered together for the White House Correspondents' Dinner without the president. And I could not possibly be more thrilled than to be more than 100 miles away from Washington swamp, spending my evening with all of you.
Meanwhile, back in Washington, D.C., the swamp, they were having the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and there was a moment where Jeff Mason was there, the president of the White House Correspondents' Dinner Association, got up and was saying, we're not fake news, and everyone got up and gave themselves a nice big round of applause.
We do that every morning for ourselves.
Right before the show. We want to bring in the editor of Conservative Review, Michelle Malkin. to talk about it. There is the standing ovation. Michelle, were you at home watching that on C-SPAN, just clapping for them as well?
Oh, you clapping for us, Michelle?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, of course.
Oh, thank you.
We need a self-congratulatory narcissism fest right now, right?
Yes.
Big hugs to everyone for just being in existence. And that is what the White House Correspondents' Dinner is every year, an annual narcissism fest. I thought that what Trump did in leaving the swamp and doing that rally last night was absolutely brilliant. And it is a great reminder, especially on this roller coaster ride, whether we're talking about the media meltdown every day, or a lot of the internal battles, serious policy disagreements that are going on in D.C. It's a reminder of vintage Trump. I wish he would do this every weekend. I think it would be fabulous.
I think he would love that. You can see him. I think he's most in his element when he's out doing these rallies with the American people. But speaking of last night, the White House Correspondents' Dinner, there were some uncomfortable moments at times when Hassan, who I think he's a correspondent for the Daily Show, which, by the way, is a fake news program. But here's some of the jokes that he had.
We gotta address the elephant that's not in the room. The leader of our country is not here. And that's because he lives in Moscow. It is a very long flight. Who is tweeting at 3 a.m. sober? Donald Trump, because it's 10 a.m. in Russia. Those are business hours. Mike Pence wanted to be here tonight, but his wife wouldn't let him because apparently one of you ladies is ovulating. So, good job, ladies. Because of you, we couldn't hang out with Mike Pence. I do not see Steve Bannon. I do not see Steve Bannon. Not see Steve Bannon. Not see Steve Bannon. Jeff Sessions couldn't be here tonight. He was busy doing a pre-Civil War reenactment. On his RSVP, he just wrote no, just no, which happens to be his second favorite N-word.
Your take, Michelle.
Vile, not funny, and confirmation of just how propagandistic most of the White House media is in their responses to those not funny lines and diatribes. So, you know, it's so puzzling, I think, to most of America outside of the coastal bubble. And Donald Trump had it absolutely right. This is an annual gathering of news fakers and Hollywood America haters and Trump bashers who get together to convince themselves that they are absolutely indispensable to American democracy and our constitutional republic. And they've become more diminished and more irrelevant and more exposed than ever, thanks to the Trump White House and the Trump administration and campaign.
Well, it's a great point. And speaking of being exposed, Jeff Mason, who's the head of the White House Correspondents Association from Reuters, went on a big diatribe at we're not fake news, we're not failing news. But he also had to acknowledge that press access under President Trump has actually been very good. They've talked more to reporters, had more press conferences. So what ultimately are they complaining about?
They're complaining about not having one of their own in the White House, and they're going to spend the next 4 to 8 years making sure that they're as much of an obstructionist force in D.C. as the Democratic Party. You know, here's the issue, of course, is that all of a sudden these people have rediscovered their commitment to the First Amendment. You know, last night some of them were tweeting about a pin that was left on every chair or at every table that says First Amendment. And I would love to have been in that room only for one reason, which is to give these people a pop quiz and ask them if they actually know all 5 freedoms that are guaranteed by the First Amendment, because they think it's all about their own protection as opposed to the rights that are guaranteed to everyone else. Where were these people when the First Amendment rights of conservative speakers, whether they're at Berkeley or Middlebury or UCLA, have been threatened? They don't care about those. You know, it's free speech for the White House press corps and nobody else.
Did you hear anything, or have you seen anything among your media friends to give you some hope that there is some period of self-reflection? Remember the New York Times after the election was sort of somewhat admitting that they needed to come down out of their skyscraper and get in touch with the American people, maybe doing a Mark Zuckerberg style drive around the country and actually meet the voters. Have you gotten any sense of that from your media friends?
Very little introspection from the White House press corps. And I think that's why the alternative media that I have been working in for quite a while now, you can't even call it new media, I guess old new media, all the social media alternatives out there. And I've made my career as an internet entrepreneur, founding 2 companies to try and circumvent so much of the corporate media left-wing monopoly, now with CRTV and Conservative Review, and more people are realizing they have choice, and choice is anathema to these people who have had such an iron grip on the media for so long. That's why they're so worked up and melting down.
Yeah, careful.
Well, Michelle, also happening yesterday in Washington, D.C. was this climate change march that drew some people from the left, including Al Gore, Leonardo DiCaprio, who has now become really the face of the climate change movement. I don't know if you were there yesterday in the march, Michelle, but have they solved all of our problems?
You know what? These are green eco-freaks, eco-radicals, and eco-hypocrites. You know, you've got Al Gore and Leonardo DiCaprio lecturing us and the rest of the world about what we need to do to conserve energy when they're on a new Gulfstream jet to board a yacht in, the next Caribbean island, or Turks and Caicos. These people are all about preaching environmental conservation while they live high on the hog. And then, of course, you've got eco-hypocrites like Tom Steyer, who I did an investigative series on for CRTV, a billionaire who is now making his name as an environmental radical when he made all of his money in the oil industry. These are the people who are leading the charge. And then, of course, didn't these people just have a March for Science last week for rationality and their commitment to scientific principles, who now are, preaching the cult and religion of climate change? They're talking about melting and ice caps melting and no more snow. We just got a foot of snow here in Denver, and they really hate that when you point out, their climate discrepancies. Weather is not climate change, except when they claim it is.
Sure. Wow. Michelle Malkin, there's only one way to end this segment. You did such a great job. I just have to...
A round of applause all around.
Yes, another one.
Really great job. Really great job.
Love you.
Michelle, always good to have you here. Have a great Sunday.
Thanks, Michelle.
You too.
All right, coming up here on the show, counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, will join us to talk about the first 100 days and maybe the next 100 days, and she'll be with us in about 20 minutes.
Look forward to that. Plus, can Republicans finally pass health care reform? President Trump said it may happen as early as this week. We are asking Freedom Caucus member Jim Jordan. He is on deck next.
But first, of course, it's summer camp. Man, my voice is breaking.
Right.
Summer camp season, and if your kids don't like basketball, how about go-karts? The perfect place to send your kids. Well, don't go anywhere, and I'll fix my voice.
Welcome back. Now that the Freedom Caucus is on board with the new Obamacare replacement plan, but what about those moderate Republicans?
I would argue that this is a bill that a moderate would more likely want to support. I think people's seats are at risk if we don't do what we said we would do. We all campaigned on repealing and replacing this law that is collapsing. If you violate your promise, if you commit the sin of hypocrisy in politics, that's the greater risk.
House Freedom Caucus member and one of its most vocal advocates, Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan, joins us now. Congressman, you're on board with the bill in its new form. A lot of your members of the Freedom Caucus are as well. Yet there's concerns that some moderates now don't like some of those changes. Where do we sit as far as passage of this repeal?
Well, I think we're close, Pete. So I hope it happens this week. Let's be clear, though. This is not full repeal, but this is as close as we think we can get. This is the best bill we think we can get out of the House right now. But we got to stay committed to actually accomplishing what the people sent us here to do, which is full repeal of Obamacare. So let's send it to the Senate. Let's keep on working.
All right, Congressman, what's different about this? Why are you on board this time?
Well, remember, because conservatives engage, we now have a work requirement for able-bodied people in the Medicaid expansion population. We now get rid of every single Obamacare tax right away. That's different from the leaked version that initially came out 8 weeks ago. And most importantly, we now have this waiver option where it says if we can't get rid of those key regulations here in Congress driving up the cost of premiums for middle-class families, at least let's give states the option to get out from under those regulations that are making premiums so unaffordable for middle-class families.
Now, that change has some moderate Republicans somehow concerned. So you need 216 votes. There are 238 House Republicans. That's a 22-vote buffer. There are apparently, per some counters, already 17 Republicans who oppose the bill. So you've got only 5 votes left standing. There are 10 leaning no and 11 undecided. What's your closing argument to the folks? Because there's a gap still to make up there.
The easiest argument is we've voted umpteen times to repeal Obamacare. This is not full repeal. So if you can vote to repeal all of it, why in the world can't we pass this piece of legislation? To me, that's the simplest and cleanest argument. So I think we're going to get there. You know, when we came on board, we brought, I think, about 21 additional conservative votes to the table who are now yes votes based on this waiver option amendment that's going to go in the legislation. So again, I think we're real close, but we voted for this umpteen times. So let's now pass something that's not full repeal, but at least it gets close. At least it's the best thing we think we can get out of this out of the House, and it's a much better bill than it was 5-6 weeks ago.
I heard you say a couple of times, I think we're going to get there. I'm hopeful we're going to get there. How confident are you this week we're actually going to see it? What major hurdles do you still see this week?
Well, I mean, you have to talk to the leadership, but I do think it'll happen. I think what the speaker said is exactly right. You know, I think the Republicans have sort of left an impression with the American people that we were going to get rid of Obamacare. This is the first important step we can take now that we control the government. So let's make sure we do that. I think the speaker's right. We have to follow through on our promises. This gets us down the road to doing that, but it's not fully there yet. So let's keep working in the Senate with our colleagues over there to make it even better once it gets through the House.
Boy, Congressman, a lot of people giving credit to the Freedom Caucus for moving a bill in a direction that they like, but also bringing votes at the same time. It'll ultimately be a huge litmus test to whether Republicans can govern in the House. Good luck this week. Appreciate it.
Thank you,
Congressman.
Thank you.
All right, coming up here on the show, Counselor to the President Kellyanne Conway will join us live to talk about the first 100 days in just a few minutes.
And it's a sad situation on college campuses, from liberal indoctrination to professors going on anti-Trump rants. So what if your kid comes home from one of those colleges for the summer? What are you going to do? How are you going to deprogram them? Larry Elder with how parents can unbrainwash from the college craziness. Stick around.
Welcome back. Turning to some headlines now and some extreme weather. At least 5 people are now dead in Texas after multiple tornadoes rip across the plains. Just look at the damage at this car dealership, which is almost unrecognizable. Cars flipped over, completely destroyed. Well, the National Weather Service confirming 3 tornadoes touched down outside of Dallas. Meanwhile, torrential rains triggering dangerous flooding. 2 people killed in Arkansas and Missouri. And in Indiana, a house exploding in flames after a lightning strike. Luckily, everyone did make it out safely. And President Trump sending a strong warning to North Korea after the latest failed missile launch. The president speaking to CBS's Face the Nation.
This was a small missile. This was not a big missile. This was not a nuclear test, which he was expected to do 3 days ago. We'll see what happens.
You say not happy. What does that mean?
I would not be happy. If he does a nuclear test, I will not be happy.
Well, the USS Carl Vinson just arrived at the Sea of Japan and joined South Korean forces.
And hunger strikes. So this is an honest question. You sent your 19-year-old off to college and they came back loving socialism and blaming America for everything. How can parents unbrainwash their kids when they come home for the summer?
Nationally syndicated Salem radio host Larry Elder joins us now. Nice to see you this morning, Larry.
Hey, Larry.
Good morning. How are you?
Oh, we're doing well. We're doing well. So this is a good question. So you spend this whole year in all of these different classes, hanging around in these safe spaces.
Paying how much money?
And yeah, and you're paying how much money. Of course, they're coming back. You're not only cleaning all of their laundry, now you have to clean their brains a little bit. Where do you start?
Right. Well, in my first book, I have a whole chapter about academic bias, and you start by arming your children with the information. I think most people don't know that liberals outnumber conservatives on college campuses by about a factor of 12 to 1. If you can find a conservative in the department, it's often the case that in a women's studies department, for example, you won't find a single conservative. Also, whether or not this bias affects the teaching in the class is important. And there's a study by the National Organization of Scholars that looked at the UC campuses here in California that says that the teachers have long since crossed the line from education to indoctrination.
Sure.
The professors' political contributions. Ivy League professors in 2012, 96% of the money went to Obama versus Mitt Romney. And the question is whether or not these kids are getting an education as opposed to getting an indoctrination. So, and there are also websites where if you hear bias in the classroom, if you feel you're being bullied, if you feel that you're going to be hurt by your grades if you quarrel with the professor, there are websites like College Fix where you can let people know what's going on in your classroom and you can fight defensively.
Okay, so Larry, absolutely right. But they walk in the door. It's May. They've just been a freshman at college. They've been studying socialism and blaming America. And they sit down at the counter and look you in the eye and say, "I love Bernie Sanders now, Dad." What do you do? How do you deprogram the biases that have now infiltrated their mind?
You know, I have on my Facebook and Twitter a link of a YouTube video with Bono, the rock star who spent years raising money to fight poverty. And he has concluded that the primary weapon to fight poverty is, get this, wait for it, entrepreneurial capitalism. And so I think if your kids realize that a rock star, a left-wing rock star, spending all these years to raise money for the poor, finally realize that the best method, the best way of alleviating poverty is, wait for it, capitalism, not Bernie Sanders collectivism or socialism, capitalism, entrepreneurial capitalism. And the kids need to understand, when you look at the history of the world, the states that have engaged in free markets, limited government, private property, those are the ones that prosper.
One of the things, Larry, I was just wondering, what is the fix here? I mean, how do you solve this? How do you make it so your kids go to college, get a good education, are not pulled one way or the other politically? Because ultimately, that's what you want out of a college education, right? Figuring it out for yourself, but just really getting a good education.
Well, you can also choose the college. Most colleges, big, small, east, west, north, south, public or private, are left-wing. But there are some small liberal arts colleges, often religiously based, one of which is called Hillsdale in Michigan, that don't even accept any kind of federal money because they don't want to have the federal government interfere with their teaching process. So there are schools like that. But the main thing is to just recognize that you are going to be outnumbered and surrounded, and recognize that professors often will teach their politics in their classroom, and that you ought to arm yourself with facts, information to counter it. And if you feel you're being hurt academically, you can take action.
So what I'm hearing too, Larry, is when you come home for the summer, get a job.
Get a job. And maybe you can even tape some of your professors, depending upon the law of the state and the rules of the campus, to verify and corroborate what you're hearing in campus, in classroom, if you feel that you're having a professor who's really just teeing off on Trump, who's biased, who's unfair, who's not listening to other alternatives in the classroom.
Good stuff.
Larry Elder, good to have you this morning.
Thanks a lot.
You got it.
All right. President Trump really slammed Democrat Chuck Schumer at last night's rally in Pennsylvania.
Senator Schumer's a bad leader, not a natural leader at all. He works hard to study leadership. When you have to study leadership, you got problems.
But will the president need Chuck Schumer's help to pass health care and tax reform? We're going to ask Kellyanne Conway when she's with us next.
Plus, look who's hitting the campaign trail. Can you say Zuckerberg 2020?
At previous dinners, we have rightly talked about the threats to press freedoms abroad. Tonight, we must recognize that there are threats to press freedoms here in the United States. We must remain vigilant. The world is watching. Press access under President Trump has been very good. Nevertheless, we cannot ignore the rhetoric that has been employed by the president about who we are and what we do. Freedom of the press is a building block of our democracy. Undermining that by seeking to delegitimize journalists is dangerous to a healthy republic. It is our job to report on facts and to hold leaders accountable. That is who we are. We are not fake news. We are not failing news organizations. And we are not the enemy of the American people.
That was Jeff Mason, the president of the White House Correspondents' Dinner last night, speaking about the press, giving themselves a pat on the back. A lot of standing ovations for themselves last night. So we asked for your emails this morning on it. And Norm wrote us, said, so sick of the mainstream media's need to have their ego fed. Nothing more than a bunch of high-paid snowflakes in a tuxedo. No wonder millennials act out of emotion rather than fact.
It's true. A lot of emotion there.
Right, says this one, did anyone think it's ironic that the banner at the dinner read celebrate the First Amendment, yet they won't let conservatives speak or cover pertinent stories?
Great point. A lot of what you don't cover says what your perspective is. And the speaker, Rich says, the speaker says that press freedom is under attack. Well, then why didn't they report on Ann Coulter's freedom of speech being under attack? Excellent point.
Good question. Keep coming in. We love hearing from you guys.
Well, now we're going to bring in Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the President of the United States. Good morning, Kellyanne. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, Kellyanne.
How was the White House Correspondents' Dinner last night?
I was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, with an overflow, energetic, enthusiastic crowd for this president and his message. I mean, they just love him, and the signs were promises made, promises kept, and that's the way they feel. And prior to that barn burner of a speech in Harrisburg, in the state where Donald Trump won 20 electoral votes and put him over the top, and now he's president, he actually before that was at a factory, a wheelbarrow factory called Ames, and it was founded in 1774. It's actually older than our country. And there he signed 2 executive orders, met the employees there, met the executives there, and I think these executive orders really tell the tale of the first 100 days and then looking toward the future. He is cracking down on cheaters and abusers within the trade and manufacturing arenas, and he has established, as of yesterday on his 100th day, an Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy, so that there's a White House liaison with commerce and in this office that is going to go ahead and review these bilateral and multilateral trade agreements and make sure they're fair to America, American worker, American interests. It seems like common sense, but it's not been done. And it's just a great example of what he was doing last night in a place where people really appreciate the fact that he has kept his promises and really appreciate the fact that they feel financially better off. They feel the country's more prosperous and more safe, despite what they don't hear.
Yeah, well, he does seem very much his most comfortable when he's out there at these rallies, when he's out meeting with the American worker. He's obviously his happiest when he's doing that away from Washington, D.C., as he said. But he used last night to really go hard on Democrats, especially Senator Chuck Schumer, who he says has to read books on how to be a leader. Question I have for you, Kellyanne, is he knows that in order to get anything big passed, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's tax reform, healthcare, he's got to get some Democrats on his side, work with them. He understands that. Why is he going so hard on Democrats?
The president does understand that, Abby, and he has invited them to the White House to come along with some of these policies and votes, but they've been very, and Senator Schumer among them, have been very clear that they are going to resist and obstruct. They've said this publicly. They're grading him as an F for his first 100 days. They won't even acknowledge all the things he's done, the over 500,000 jobs that have been created, all these confidence measures, small business confidence, manufacturing, home building, consumer confidence. Everybody happy to spend their money again, feeling like things are different, and yet they won't even credit that. They won't credit all the jobs created and all the fuel that will be moved because of him opening up the Dakota and Keystone Access pipelines. They won't credit him for chipping away at the regulatory framework. Not only will they not credit him, they won't join him in doing it. What did we cobble together? 3 Democratic Senate votes for Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court? I mean, what is the objection to him, who had received a dozen or so Democratic Senate votes 10 years earlier? None of them want to help on health care. Nobody has a thing to say about taxes. Are you telling me that there are Democratic voters out there who are going to benefit from these tax decreases, this middle-class tax cut, the largest ever, and yet their members in the Senate and the House can't say, gee, I'm going to help on that because I know it will benefit? 15% tax bracket for small businesses, S-corps. You've never heard of this before. Going from 7 brackets to 3, that's going to benefit people right, left, and center. This president doesn't look at your party affiliation when he sees how you will benefit from his policies and his promises, and we would like the Democrats to come along. So my message to them is 2 questions. First, who exactly is the leader of your party? Is it Warren? Is it Hillary? Is it Obama? Is it Tom Tom Perez? Is it Bernie Sanders? Is it Chuck Schumer? We're all confused. We know how much you've lost over the last 8 years under President Obama, nearly 1,000 state legislative seats, the House, the Senate, the governorships, and indeed the White House. Number one, who should we consider the leader of your party? And number two, can you find it? Can you find anything where you think bipartisanship is in order, where you will help this president and this country to succeed? We welcome that, but we challenge them to come to us and tell us where it is they can do that.
Kellyanne, yeah, it's a fair point. It cuts both ways. I mean, ultimately, when you're boycotting the inauguration and resisting, it's hard to feel like you have a good faith partner. The president is up this morning tweeting, as he oftentimes is, and he's talking this morning about Obamacare. He just tweeted out moments ago on Obamacare. He said, you can't compare anything to Obamacare because Obamacare is dead. Dems want billions to go to insurance companies to bail out donors. New health care plan is on its way. We'll have much lower premiums and deductibles while at the same time taking care of pre-existing conditions. Now, Kellyanne, this is a huge legislative priority for the president, and it has been for Republicans for 8 years. We had Jim Jordan on, a prominent member of the Freedom Caucus, earlier. He says he's on board. Most members of the Freedom Caucus are. How close and how confident are you that this is the week we get health care repeal and reform passed?
Well, I'm not going to comment on the actual timeline because I think that is not as relevant as doing it right. I would note that it took President Obama 16 months to get Obamacare passed, and in less than 16 weeks, President Trump is getting very close with the members of Congress, no Democrats, the members of Congress, to try to get meaningful repeal and replace legislation. And I'm happy that the president tweeted twice this morning on health care because, A, he reminded us all why this is happening in the first place, that Obamacare has really underserved millions of Americans who either had health insurance they liked and lost it or never got health insurance, even though they were told, some were told you can keep your doctor, you can keep your plan, others were told you'll get a new doctor, you'll get a new plan, all of which was a big lie. Secondly, he's previewing in 140 characters or less what this will be about. This is about driving down premiums and driving down costs and giving people more quality and access. And he's making the point that the Democrats seem to be willing to shut down the government if they don't get the CSR payments. So we feel very confident that the progress that's been made in the last month is going in the right direction, and certainly that the repeal and replace effort that brings together this very diverse coalition of House Freedom Caucus, of Tuesday group members, of many dozens of Republicans who don't feel that they're in either group necessarily, but all of whom ran to repeal and replace Obamacare. But they want to make sure it does exactly that, and we want to make sure that the replacement is something that allows a more patient-centric free market system so that you have health savings accounts, you have small business owners like some of the plumbers and the hairdressers we met last night in Pennsylvania who don't have health insurance because they don't get it through the government and they don't get it through an employer. So we want to make sure those individuals can pool together, join together to get health insurance and coverage under our plan, which they've not been able to do.
Not that this is a small topic. We have a few seconds left, Kelly, and I want to get your take on North Korea. We've been talking about domestic policy. How concerned is the president that Kim Jong-un is going to become even more unhinged, and this could be the thing that we're all talking about over the summer?
Well, the president has made very clear that he is watching. He and his cabinet members, his national security team, are watching. And he's been very strong in his statements on North Korea. There was a bipartisan briefing of the senators at the White House last week with the president, the vice president, the secretary of state, our secretary of defense, and other generals. And so we invited the Democratic and Republican members of the Senate to come over and be briefed. Obviously, the relationship that President Trump has established with the president of China is very helpful in this regard, in that you have China also making some moves that they were not doing in the past, frankly. Toward North Korea. So everybody is very concerned and everybody is watching, and I'm even heartened to see some of our Democratic Senate colleagues take to the airwaves and speak publicly against North Korea in this regard.
Maybe it takes national security to bring some people together. Kellyanne Conway, thank you very much.
You guys have a lot on your plate. Thanks for being with us, Kellyanne.
Have a lovely day.
Have a good Sunday.
Next, we're going to answer this question. What's the latest on the Susan Rice unmasking investigation? Journalist Eli Lake, he's next.
Welcome back. Well, President Trump blaming the media for pushing the Russia fake news story in his first 100 days. Listen.
I have approvals in the high 40s. Every network that you see, with the exception of Fox, Fox has been fair, but every network you see hits me on every topic, made up stories like Russia. They do the faux Russia. I call it the fake Russia story. Russia story was made up because they were embarrassed by their loss.
Yeah, so will the Russia story ever go away? Bloomberg View columnist Eli Lake joins us now. Eli, thanks for being here this morning. You've been all over this story from the beginning, getting scoops and information about who's leaking what and what's happening. So when you step away 100 days of this presidency, is this a faux Russian story?
Well, there is a legitimate question about how the Russians influenced the election. The FBI is looking into that. The two congressional intelligence committees are looking into that. But the argument that was made by Trump's opposition that he was a stooge of Vladimir Putin, that he would do the bidding of the Russians as president, which is as grave a charge as you can make, has not been proven to be right when you look at what Trump has actually done with regard to Russia in his first 100 days. Let's just go through the list. He has supported the expansion of NATO in a small country called Montenegro. The Russians are so concerned about Montenegro that a prosecutor in Montenegro accused the Russians of being behind a coup attempt earlier this year. Vladimir Putin is not happy about the fact that President Trump managed to strike Russia's only client in the Middle East, Syria, with 59 Tomahawk missiles, with pretty much very little warning, something that Obama was unwilling to do. Add to this news that the Justice Department and the CIA director are talking about prosecuting Julian Assange, who is now formally called by the U.S. intelligence community an asset, or basically said that, you know, he laundered hacked information during the campaign that actually the Trump campaign was willing to use against Hillary. But now that you have Trump's government willing to prosecute or saying that they're willing to prosecute Julian Assange of WikiLeaks, that's another sort of argument that the narrative that Trump is somehow doing Russia's bidding is just not right. Yeah. And that, I think, needs to be taken into account. When we look at all this.
And let's be clear here. I mean, we're a few months into his presidency. Still, no one has connected the dots with any collusion the president has had with the Russians. How much longer is this going to go on? Because it still seems to be a huge focus for much of the media. I mean, you watched some of the jokes last night, the White House correspondents did. I mean, they still can't get over Russia.
Well, I would just say this, if that the more we're learning about what the FBI probe is, but we have to be very careful because all these leaks about, you know, ongoing investigations usually don't turn out very well for the media. I would just look up Scooter Libby or Wenho Lee. So sometimes what everybody thinks they know is wrong. But recently what we've learned is that a lot of this is centering around a guy named Carter Page who had a real peripheral connection, never met Donald Trump. If that's what it is, if it's Paul Manafort and Carter Page, and you know that does not necessarily look like Trump's inner circle, even though Manafort was for around 2 months the campaign manager. He was fired in August, and you know, you sort of see where it goes from there.
If that's your smoking gun, it's a water pistol. Briefly, you broke the story at Susan Rice. Any developments on that?
Well, I'd say at this point that there has been, you know, I think some wish casting on the part of Democrats that there's nothing to see there and there won't be any part of it. My sense is that there will be an investigation into the Obama administration's broader policy of unmasking. And that is going to be part of the reauthorization of the FISA law, which will be coming up in the next few months.
All right, Eli, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up next, David Bossie.